My name is Rich Chester, and I'm the Director of Business Intelligence at LPA Software Solutions. It's my pleasure to be with you today to talk to you about what's new in the Cognos Analytics release R11, otherwise known as version 11.0.11. This webinar, like all of our previous webinars, is being recorded. All of our previous webinars are available in two places. First of all, on lpa.com/resources, and also out on YouTube in the LPA Software Solutions YouTube channel. Our What's New in version 11.x series is certainly all available there. We also have focused webinars on such topics as dashboards, data modules, stories. We also have some function-specific webinars like analytics and manufacturing. In addition to Cognos Analytics and Business Intelligence services, LPA also offers an array of financial performance management services, information management, as well as predictive analytics. And there are a number of webinars from those practices available in both sources as well. So we do hope you will take advantage of this education resource that's available to you for free. And even if you use lpa.com/resources, there's no registration required. We just hope that they are a useful library of knowledge for you to reference. LPA Software Solutions has been around for the last 15 years or so, focused entirely on IBM Analytics and implementations of those products for various industries across the US and indeed across the world. Some of the services that you might find handy would be our upgrade and migration services, where we would take you from literally any version of Cognos BI, any 8, any 10, or any previous version of 11, and move you to the current release. That would be installing, configuring, upgrading your models, testing your content, helping you roll it out, and educate your end users. All of those services are part of that collection, that bundle, if you will, of services. So you might need some or all of those services. And if you do, LPA would be privileged to provide you with more information or a quote. Also, there's a number of folks out there who are using the Cognos 7 solutions, Impromptu and PowerPlay Client, and so on. And we are often asked to migrate those folks forward to the current release of Cognos, in this case, 11.0.11. Sometimes the overhead of managing your own Cognos environment, whether it's in your computer room or up on a cloud server, is more than some organizations can handle, or they just simply like to stop handling it so they can focus those resources on other value-added tasks in the organization. If that sounds like you, LPA has a number of managed services offerings that would help you manage your environment, manage the servers your environment is running on, automatically do upgrades throughout the year, handle your Cognos administrative tasks, your Cognos configuration activities, your system monitoring, your report authoring needs, your modeling needs. So there's a managed service, an outsourced service for ongoing services, such as the ones I mentioned that we have a portfolio of. Again, if you would like to offload some of your own resources from doing those tasks and instead have that outsourced, LPA may be the provider for you. We have a collection of report authors who are in our facility in Buffalo, New York, who specialize in rapidly producing reports from specs. So if you have a backlog of reports, if you have a backlog of changes to reports that you need some help with, our report factory in Buffalo, New York, where we have a team of folks dedicated to doing these sorts of things for our clients, may be able to help you in getting back on top of that backlog. Sometimes, especially prior to upgrading an environment, organizations want to ensure that they're starting from a Cognos environment that is optimized, that their reports are written correctly, that their models have been adhering to best practices. that their security settings, which would of course migrate forward into 11 from say 8 or 10, are the best they can be and are reflective of IBM best practices as well as LPA's own experience with these kinds of settings. Sometimes that's important before you migrate forward. And if that's the case, we have a health check service that will do exactly that. We'll come in, we'll take a look at your environment end to end in terms of how it was installed, how it was configured, how it's been tuned, how it's secured, and how your reports are written, and how your framework models, your transformer models, your dynamic cube models are written to ensure that everything has been done according to a set of best practices. And then finally, you may have already upgraded to a previous version of 11, and you are in need of some help rolling out the new features and functions, training your organization on it may be as simple as the new reporting interface versus Cognos 10 interface, navigating this new portal and scheduling reports and subscribing to reports and finding the reports and dashboards you need. Perhaps it's to learn how to use the new dashboard tool or to learn how to apply the new data modules tool. Whatever the Cognos topic is, LPA has a training course that will match it. And we are also able to customize our training materials to fit very specific scenarios or to, if you will, assemble pieces of different courses into a custom course specifically for your audience. So if any of these services sound like they might help you in achieving analytics nirvana in your organization, do please enter in the chat window or send an email to me, rchester@lpa.com. And we'll be happy to provide you with more information and potentially even a quote so you could engage LPA to help you in these regards. Now, on to what's new in R11. The list of R11 enhancements is deceptively short, but I believe they are rather impactful. The first one I know a lot of my customers have been waiting for, and that is an official support for the Cognos Connection portal pages that so many of us have as automatically opening tabs when we log into Cognos 10. So IBM has embraced the portal page in R11 and has provided support for those. And I will do a demo. I'll start in my Cognos 10 environment and show you the setup I have there. And then I will migrate that content to 11 and show you how this new support manifests, what your users will see from Cognos 10 to Cognos 11 as it has to do with these portal pages. Another great enhancement is the introduction of custom polygons on maps. Let me give you a for instance. Sometimes it's important to plot your data spatially on a map, but for your regions. Maybe it's your sales territories. Maybe it's just how you've divided up a particular country. Maybe it is a collection of polygons that have to do with weather data or perhaps crime statistics or whatever. If the regions or points that are part of that data set are not based on the predefined regions that are available in Cognos 11, zips, cities, states, countries, but are instead, let's say, a custom region where you divide up the US into 4, which is the example I'll do with you today, then you would need to be able to create these custom regions, these custom polygons, using a tool, and then upload those, as it turns out, to IBM's partner Mapbox, and then reference those layers in your reports and dashboards. So I will not show you an example of crafting a custom polygon. That is its own webinar. I'm going to use a custom set of polygons that IBM created and has already loaded into Mapbox. As an example of this customization, I'll show you a data module that creates a calculated column called region that divides the United States into 4 regions. And then I'll show you how to reference the custom polygon on a map. So that's coming in the demo. And of course, more information about each of these in some slides. Every once in a while, you get an ambiguous connection error in Cognos Analytics. And there's a couple of scenarios where IBM determined that it was able to find a connection without automatically saying when you have two connections, they're automatically ambiguous and IBM has to give you that error. So there's a couple of new rules that are applied to how the Cognos Analytics tool determines if there are indeed more than one connection available to the logged in user. So I'll go over what that new scenario is for you. And then finally, in the general case, there is an Easter egg, I would say. I didn't find this in any of the official materials about release 11. Found it actually quite by accident. One of our customers had mentioned that they really wished that the old schedule screen from Cognos 10 was available in the product. This was a couple of releases ago. And one of the folks on my team here at LPA was poking around the scheduling interface just last week in R11 and discovered that the classic schedule definition screen is now available to you. So that was sort of an Easter egg happy discovery that I'll talk to you about. And then in the world of dashboards and stories, IBM has implemented this notion of being able to cache data rather than always going to the data source for fresh data, because not always do you need fresh data on a visualization. So we'll look at this very simple setting in the property sheet on visualizations in dashboards. So that is the collection of enhancements. Virtually all the enhancements that IBM considers that are not already part of a predetermined roadmap, as you might imagine with this product, there's a lot of thought that goes into the life cycle of the product. And so there is a set of enhancements that IBM is planning that go along with that roadmap. But in addition to that, the other enhancements that make it into a particular release are actually all coming from the Request for Enhancement website, community website that IBM hosts. It's a free website. You log in with a free ID. So the first thing you would have to do, if you haven't already, is register for a free account. Go to the Cognos Analytics area, and you would scan through the available submissions, the submissions from folks like yourselves who have had what they think is a good idea for an enhancement in the tool. For those that you agree would be great enhancements for you, you would vote so that the number of votes on that item would go up. You could also, of course, submit your own ideas for folks to vote on. It's those ideas with the highest number of votes that IBM considers for inclusion in a release. And, we've had a number of releases this year. We've had, 8, 9, 10, and 11 all contain enhancements that came from the RFE community. So it is absolutely a tool that IBM leverages to get, if you will, the voice of us, the customer. So I strongly encourage you to browse it and vote for the enhancements you wish, as well as submit the great ideas that come to mind as you're using Cognos Analytics so that others can vote on them for inclusion in the product. Support for legacy portal pages is, in my mind, a very big deal. It is something that I have to say has prevented a lot of my Cognos 10 customers from migrating to 11 because the support for them really was not complete. That's not to say that they would not run, but there was no obvious way out of the box as part of the migration for the portal pages associated with any one user to be immediately available to that user upon upgrade. And now there is. So there is a advanced configuration setting that you have to set through something called the configuration tool. This is a tool brand new to me, to be quite honest. This configuration utility is a tool. I think it was introduced to the product last year, where if there is a setting for which there is no UI, you would use this tool to set that setting. So there is a setting in the case of legacy portal pages for which there is no UI to change the value. So you use this configuration setter tool, and I'll show you how to do this, where you would set the setting that's shown there, content apps.enable my portal pages, set that to true, hit submit, and within 10 seconds, you will see on everyone's navigation bar a new button that is specifically the My Portal Pages button. So we'll see how all of that works together. Interestingly enough, when I run a portal page, I click on the My Portal Pages button, I click on one of my portal pages, it will actually open in the main Cognos Analytics interface. It doesn't launch externally like, say, Query Studio does right now. It launches right within what IBM refers to as the glass interface. It shows up in your switcher, and you can even make it your default home. So we've talked in the past about making reports or dashboards your home, as opposed to the welcome screen, which is the default home. These portal pages can now be your home as well. They do only leverage the classic viewer. They cannot leverage the interactive viewer, but since they're all coming up from Cognos 10 anyway, that's all they would ever access, because Cognos 10 only had the classic viewer. So out of the box, all the reports that run in these viewers, as well as any Cognos workspaces that are running in these Cognos portal pages, would all be running in this classic viewer world anyway. So I don't think that's a huge limitation. So I'll do a bunch of demo on that in a moment. In regards to custom polygons, so these are the custom regions, the custom points can be mapped. Let me say that a different way. Points can be mapped in a custom region, or you can color a custom region. And you define a custom region initially by creating a Mapbox Studio account, because this is all functionality that's enabled by the partnership that IBM has with Mapbox. So if you go to mapbox.com, you can create a Mapbox Studio account. There are free accounts that allow up to 5 gigabytes of storage. You can also purchase plans if you need more storage than that. But once you've got a Mapbox Studio account, you can then upload your Polygon files, the files that reflect your region's boundaries. And they need to be in a format called GeoJSON. And there are a lot of tools out there that'll let you create custom polygons, and they store data in shape files or KML files. And you can use open source software. QGIS is one that IBM mentions in one of their articles to convert those to GeoJSON. Once you've uploaded them and you've created the layer in Mapbox, there are 3 keys that you want to grab from the Mapbox screen: the map ID, the layer name, and the property name. The property name is the name that you're going to map. That's going to match the regions in your data, if you will. That's the 2 things that sort of link up. And the rest of what you've uploaded is so that the boundaries can be drawn on the map. So 3 pieces that you need. My demo will start with the 3 keys that IBM has provided for their sample custom layer, and I'll show you how you enter those keys into the properties on a dashboard is what I'll do, but you would do the same thing in a report. So you enter those 3 keys, you drag in the data that matches your property name, and the mapping works. The mapping appears in a widget in a dashboard or in a visualization in your report. IBM has a document that does describe these best practices as far as working with your custom polygons. Don't add custom or confidential information and upload that to Mapbox. The custom, confidential, sensitive info, right, is not a good idea to expose in this semi-public way. Of course, to use that data requires that you have the 3 keys. So you want to keep those closely to your vest, if you will. You don't want those to be publicly known. Provide it to the folks who need to use those keys to create maps in their reports, but maybe don't put them up on your portal where everybody can see them. For better performance, it's best to compress your larger files so that they're less than 10 meg. You see, that file has to be transmitted to the dashboard or report in order for the layer to be presented. So the smaller the layer is in terms of total size, right, the faster it will transmit, therefore the faster the map will present when you run your dashboard or report. There are some auto zooming settings that you should be sure to set appropriately. And that is the last 2 bullets here. I'm not going to read these explicitly. Do take a screenshot of this, but also if you Google for IBM's custom polygons in Cognos Analytics, you'll find these best practices there, and you'll be able to click on those helper links that are shown. In terms of ambiguous connections, so if the logged in user is attempting to create a connection to a data source by running a report or a dashboard, and that connection has two or more definitions that the logged in user has access to, sometimes Cognos will prompt you, especially when you're working interactively with a report or a dashboard, it will prompt you to pick a connection. But a lot of times, especially with reports running in the background, it can't ask you. And therefore, because there's two and it cannot connect as a result, you get this ambiguous connection error. And what happened is that the ambiguous connection error was coming up even though, in truth, the connection wasn't ambiguous. Let's take this for instance. When I have a package that could run in CQM or DQM, right? And sometimes the activity is CQM and it uses the CQM setting, and sometimes the activity is DQM and it uses the DQM setting. Well, they're mutually exclusive scenarios. I can only be running in one of the two query modes. And if one of the connections is native and one of the connections is JDBC, there really is no ambiguity about which one should be used. However, before this enhancement, Cognos would say, well, there's two that you have access to, therefore it's ambiguous, regardless of the fact that only one was germane to the query mode in use. So now that's changed. So now if you have a package that is configured for DQM, any non-JDBC source is ignored. So if you've got two JDBC sources in this scenario, you will still have an ambiguous connection problem. But if you only have one, now you will no longer have that issue. And similarly, but in reverse, CQM ignores any JDBC connections and only looks at the native connections. And again, if there's only one, you're good. If there's two, you're still in an ambiguous connection. This really addresses when I have one JDBC and one native on the same data source. No longer should I get an ambiguous connection error in that scenario. This is the Easter egg I talked about, access to the classic schedule screen. So when you install 11.0.11 and you go to the schedule tab on the property sheet and create a new schedule, if you scroll to the bottom, you'll now find on the lower left a link called Classic View. And when you click the Classic View link, son of a gun, you get the Cognos 10 schedule dialog as shown here on the screen. I'll show you that. That's obviously a very quick demo. I'll show you that when we get to the demo. And then there's this data cache notion, which is the final enhancement to talk about before we demonstrate some things. So every visualization now has a property called data cache, and it's set to automatic. And automatic really only applies if you're using a framework manager package, first of all. And automatic means do what the model says. So the framework model has a cache setting. If you set to automatic, which like I said is the default for all visualizations, it will use whatever, it will use the cache if framework manager was set to use a cache. Otherwise it won't use a cache. So it'll do whatever framework manager says. On, when it's a package data source in your dashboard, overrides the setting in Framework Manager. Otherwise, if it's a data module, this says use caching for the data module. There's nothing to override, if you will. This just says let's cache. And data is reused as you make changes on the dashboard, provided IBM's engine, the query engine, says I already have the data I need. So there's a question that gets asked, if you will, behind the scenes whenever you've modified a widget on a dashboard. And the question is, do I already have the data I need? If I do, I'll use it. If I don't, I'll have to go and query and get data out of the database. So on says do that. Ask that question, make that determination. Off says don't. Simply don't. Just do not cache. Always go to the server, the database, if you will, and grab fresh data every time. So on or off it's important to understand whether fresh data is always desired, because obviously with on, sometimes it won't go get fresh data, right? Because sometimes it'll say, oh, I already have everything I need in memory, so I don't have to go to the database. So you use this knowing about how often the data in the data source changes and about how fresh you need the data on the screen when a person is using a dashboard. This feature will not apply to uploaded data files. So it uploaded spreadsheet source or a dataset source. There's no such notion as caching those. And those are awful fast, right? Because they're in the Cognos content store. And if you think about it, they are themselves cached data, right? An uploaded file is a copy of a file. You change the file, the uploaded copy doesn't change until you re-upload it. Similarly, a data set, that's just an extract from a package or a data module. It is itself a cache of output from those two items. So refreshing those automatically, those static copies of data, that doesn't make sense. So this is simply not applied to those guys. When the refresh automatically feature, this is the timer feature. Every 5 minutes, go get new data. You could set that on any visualization. If you have set that, then it ignores the data cache setting. So if you're using the automatic refresh mode property on a visualization in your dashboard, then fine, it will follow the rules there. If you're not using that automatic refresh feature, then this data caching option will apply. And the idea here is if I am highlighting data in a widget as opposed to filtering a widget, then it doesn't have to go back to the database to redisplay that widget. Maybe even if I'm filtering a widget, it will have that data cached in memory and it won't have to go back. So this is a, if you don't have to, don't do it setting. That's what on is. Off says always go back to the data source. Automatic says do what the framework modeler said when it comes to using cache. So that's the data cache property. I'll show you where that is as we do our demos. So let's jump into the demos. I'm going to bring up my Cognos 10 environment first, because we're going to talk through this notion of portal pages. So let me log on as Joe user. So Joe user is one of my users, and Joe has his environment, his preferences set up to open 2 portal pages whenever he gets into Cognos 10. He's first got this Run My Reports tab, and he can run any of the reports in this folder from here. So you click on a Query Studio report, and over here on the right-hand side, it will run that Query Studio report and present. So a lot of us have these kind of navigation widgets with report viewer widgets on the right, and we just use this kind of technique to make it very easy. Whoops, I don't have the right data source out there. And make it very easy to run reports within a frame next to a navigation frame. So that's one of the tabs he has. Another one is that he has this OS shipping analysis, which I actually just ran there. This one is just a tab he can click to. So he's got 2 tabs defined out there when he logs in. So that's Joe user. Let me log in as another user just to show you. Let me log off here. And let me log on as Jane user. So Jane has a similar setup, but only one of those 2 tabs. So Jane has the Run My Reports tab, where you can run a report over here in the viewer, but does not have the direct access to the shipping analysis like Joe user has. And of course, they both have access to public folders and my folders. So obviously, this is a C10 environment I set up specifically for this demo, so there's not a lot of objects out here. The administrator does not have any portal set up. And everybody right now on this Cognos 10 environment is an administrator. But let me do this right. Let me log off of users. And let me log on as an administrator. So the administrator, just to show you, has no tabs other than public and my. And what I want to do is I want to upgrade this environment to Cognos 11.0.11. So the administrator would go to administration and would go to configuration and go to content administration and would create a content store export. That's one of the 2 ways to do this. And when you create a full content store export, right, the trick is to tick include user account information. Otherwise, you lose people's my folders and you lose their profiles, which include the information about what portal tabs they have. So you would run this to completion. That would create a zip file. That's way 1 to upgrade your Cognos 10 content. Way 2 is to take the content store database or databases if you split across like Notify and Human Task and so on. Take your entire content store, whether that's one database or multiples, and make a copy, a brand new copy in a new database name or in a new schema. And then point Cognos 11 to that new schema rather than to your Cognos 10 schema, and it will update that schema in place, if you will. So that's the second way. So you can do this export. If you do, be sure you tick include user account information, or you can copy your content store database to a new database or new schema, and then point Cognos 11.0.11 to that new schema. Either way will work. It will have the same good result. So that's part one, and that's the way we're set up, with Joe user having 2 tabs, Jane user having 1 tab, the administrator having no tabs, but also having the task in my example of exporting the content and ticking include information. So I've done all of that already, and I've copied the export zip file to my Cognos 11 deployment folder for importing. And indeed, to save us time on the demo, I've already imported it. So I will now log into my Cognos 11.0.11 environment. And again, I'm going to log in as an administrator. Now, I've already done the import. And so you'll see that when I log in, I don't have any special buttons. I haven't enabled that feature. I have out in team content, I have the packages and production reports folders from my Cognos 10 environment, and I installed all the samples. That's all I've done in this environment. The production reports folder includes the Run My Reports Cognos connection page. And up until R11, in other words, through 11.0.10, my only option would be to navigate here, click on the tab, it would open a new tab, and it would run. And this will absolutely run correctly. It will run exactly as it did in Cognos 10, but there was no automatically open it. There was no special consideration for the user profile saying this user has easy access to these pages via their tabs. So that's the enhancement. It's not that the pages don't work in R10 and before. It's that they run outside of the glass interface, and there's no consideration paid to the user profile. Let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to log in to Cognos 11 right now as Joe user who had 2 tabs. And what you'll see is that there's nothing on Joe user's screen. There's no 2 extra tabs. Even though that's how he was set up in Cognos 10, there's no simple access to them. He would have to go out to production reports and click on those Cognos connection pages in order to get them. So there was no automatic access. There was no simple access like there was in 10. So that's what there is in Cognos 11.0.11 even without setting this advanced property. So let's set the advanced property. First of all, I'm going to log in as the administrator. And then I'm going to use this configuration utility to configure that advanced property. So again, configuration utility is new. What you first do is log in as an administrator and have an administrator session running. Then you could, in this tab or open in a new tab, you can enter the URL for the configuration utility. I happen to have a shortcut to it right here that I'm just going to drag in, but this is the URL. So you reference your server the same way. You don't have to be using the gateway. You could do server :9300/bi utils config setter.html. That's perfectly acceptable. Or if you're using the gateway, you use port 80 and you use whatever your virtual directory name is, IBM Cognos being the most common. So either one will work just fine. But you first log in as an administrator. You have an administrator session running. Then you come here and you enter your configuration name. So it is content apps.enable my portal pages. Now, what should happen is that you get the current value if you wait a second. Now, what I found, and I don't know if this is because of my configuration or if it's just an incompatibility, but what I found is when I did this in IE11, I it didn't work. I either got an error, or worse yet, in my opinion, I got no error. It just didn't work. It just did nothing. That may happen to you as well, especially if you don't follow the process. Log in as an administrator, then navigate to the config setter. If you look up the config setter on Google, you'll find this setting and 2 others. So it's a relatively new tool. I don't know if this is the way of the future for advanced settings, or if this is a stopgap measure, but it works absolutely fine. I'm doing it in Chrome. It worked for me in Firefox. It did not work for me in IE, so just to be aware that that's the case. So it's currently set to false. I'm going to set it to true. Now notice this says it may take 10 seconds, no need to restart your server. I think that's awesome. It actually seems to take less than 10 seconds as far as I'm concerned. No feedback, done, good, nothing. But it did work. So let me show you, I'll close this tab, let me show you, I'll just refresh this page. And I am logged in as the administrator. And when it redisplays my navigation bar, you're going to see an entry called My Portal Pages. Now, this administrator had no tabs, so at the moment, this is empty. Let's log on as Joe User and see what it looks like for Joe User. So let me log out here and just jump back in as Joe User. So Joe had 2 tabs. So when he signs in, he will have the My Portal tabs entry on the left-hand side, and in it will be his 2 tabs. So they don't show up as tabs. That's absolutely true. It's not equivalent from that perspective, but I do have a special place for my portal pages, and all the portal pages I had in 10 will I don't want to say magically, will intentionally be listed here under my portal pages. When I open the Run My Reports, for example, you'll notice it runs within the Cognos 11 interface. It's not running as a separate tab. It's not running as an external item. It's now running as an internal item. See, it's in my switcher. So I can have many portal pages open that I can switch between. So I could also open my second portal page, and that will also open in my switcher. And then I could switch between my open portal pages, right? So this is that shipping analysis report that Joe User had. This is the Run My Reports that Joe User had. And indeed, if I click on the Analysis Studio report, that would normally have to launch in a separate tab, but because it's part of this page, it launches within this viewer over here. So that's Joe. Now, Jane only had one of the 2. So let's, while I'm here, let me just show you under More. I could make this my home page. So a report or a dashboard and now a portal page, all under More, when you run them, have this set as home feature that would allow this to be my default landing page rather than the welcome screen that we had that showed the recent items and had access to the help on the right-hand side. Instead, I would see this, which might be much more efficient for me to log in and see rather than that generic welcome screen. It's up to each individual user, but this set as home is also available for the portal pages. So Jane, I'm going to log off as Joe just by closing my browser and jump on as Jane. Now Jane only had one, and so you would expect that Jane would have just that one under the list of my portal pages on the left-hand side, and that is indeed exactly what's there. Now, the other thing that you can do with portal pages, as it turns out, with this feature enabled, which, by the way, you can disable just by going back to the config setter and setting it to false, and then all this goes away, and it reverts, if you will, to the pre-R11 view that I showed you. When you click on it, it launches in its own tab. So if you turn it on, you decide you don't like it, or after a while, maybe you've migrated away from these older portal pages and you no longer need that button on the left, you can turn it off. But let's suppose now that Jane is a Cognos 11 user, and she would like to add that other tab, quote unquote, that other page to her My Portal tabs. All she needs to do is navigate to Team Content and go to where the page definition is stored, which is in Production Reports. And so the portal page is here, which is the OS Shipping Analysis page. Click on More, or right click, and you see add to my portal pages. There you go. So now Jane has access to both. So this isn't just about copy what's in 10 and then you're stuck. I could remove from the list of portal pages, and I can also add to my list of portal pages. And when I delete from here, it does not delete the object in team content. It only deletes the entry from my portal pages. Now in Cognos 10, what we were used to was going to our preferences and setting which tabs we want. That's not part of 11, right? So that's not where you do it. You do it over here where you manage the ones you have. And then you can more or right click, as it turns out, will also work, and do add to my portal pages to manage the list of portal pages you have access to. So that's the enhancement. That's the R11 portal page support enhancement that's rolled out. So let's move on to the custom layers in a map. Now, IBM has out there for all of us to leverage if we wish, a few helper things. First thing they have is this information. And you'll see I'll be cutting and pasting this. So remember the 3 IDs I mentioned in my slides, where you had to, after you created your polygons in the JSON format, the GeoJSON format, you uploaded them to Mapbox, and the layer got defined. There were 3 properties you had to copy. And these are the three items. You see they're not easily remembered, so cutting and pasting is going to be the order of the day. But these are the values I need to access that custom region setup. So that's part 1. You need to have the layer. Part 2, you need to have data in your data source that matches the, in this case, name property associated with the layer. You get to name these properties, by the way, but that's the property that is in this IBM sample. If you screenshot this, this will absolutely work for you. It's available to everyone. These settings are also in a sample report that comes with the new samples in 11. So with those, I'm going to show you the second half, which is the data part. So again, to match this sample custom layer, in the samples for release 11 that you can import, there is a data module under samples data, and the data module is called Storm Events 2015. And if you open that data module, you'll find that it's just a single spreadsheet table, and one of the columns in here is called region. And this happens to be a calculated column. And I'll show you the calculation quickly. It's a big, long case statement. Clearly, this is associated with just some United States data for this particular data set. And as you can see, it just categorizes each state into one of 4 regions. And there you go. So if you will, the left side, the data side, you have to have a region name in your data to match the region name in the layer you uploaded to MapInfo, and the name of that region name property can be anything. In our sample, it's name all uppercase. So that's both sides of the equation. I've got data that matches the info in my layer. I've got the layer defined in Mapbox. Now let's put the two together in a dashboard. So I am going to create a dashboard from this particular data set. So one of the fast ways to do that is to more or right click on a data module and choose create dashboard. So that's what I'll do. I'm not going to worry too much about layout. I'll just go with a blank canvas. Up will come my data. Now there's my data just as we saw in the data module. I've got the region I want to map, and I've got some measures that I could put on that map. Let's first of all, let's just see the region values. So I'm going to go to my visualizations, and from here I'm going to choose a list, and then into the list I'm going to drop region, and you see those are my 4 regions, and I'm just going to collapse that onto my canvas, and I'll make it much smaller because I want some room for my map. But that's that. Now, what I want to do is put these on the map, right? That's what the whole point of the layer is, to map these regions. So I will go to the automatic visualization tool in this case. You see, first I picked the visualization that I wanted there because this is geographic data already, you see, and that's a property in the data module that the data modeler set. But that means that it'll display a map automatically and try to map these regions. So I'll drag this over. I'm expecting to get a map because that's the default for geo data. However, I'm expecting the map not to function. Why? Because I'm referencing Midwest, Northeast, South, and West, and those are not known to the default layer for this map. The regions in the default layer don't match these guys. And you see I've got the warning guy up here. Let me turn on the property sheet for this map. And you'll see under regions and under points, there's these properties, map ID, layer name, and property name. I'm going to do it as regions. I'm going to reference those three attributes, right, that were copied from Mapbox after the layer was created. And that's what these are. So I'll just copy these in. So this first one is the map ID. The second one is the layer name. And I think I can type in name in capital letters successfully without copying. So there you go. So having done that, now this data should refresh, and now you see how it's highlighted the US. I don't know if it's included Alaska or not, so I guess the data set doesn't include Alaska. So now it's highlighted the 4 regions, and you see the polygon coming up. So this is the custom polygon that's part of the definition. So the definition outlined these states, if you will. So the process of creating the layer was to create these 4 polygons and put those in the GeoJSON format and upload them to Mapbox. So that's where these are coming from. But I have not added a measure to plot on this map. So let's go ahead and let's just drag a measure onto the map. And what I would expect is that each region now, the 4 regions, will get colored based on the number in this measure. In this case, one state, the lowest, one region, the lowest region has 7 direct injuries, and the highest in a region is 861. That's this key tells me that. If I hover over a region, you see there's my 861 region. That's why it's the darkest. That one's sort of in the middle. This one looks like it might be the lightest at 7, right? And then the Northeast region is somewhere in the middle. So can I still map with the default regions? Sure, I could put points on states, for example, right? So in my points layer of my map, right, I could drag over state, and that would now give me data for each state, a point on each state. And if I use a measure for my point size, that will adjust my point sizes. Right, so I can use the default layers and my custom layers in the same map. I can minimize that and just make this a little bigger. And then you see I've got 2 layers. And that's what this button helps me. I can turn off one layer or the other. That's what this one does. This button's only available in dashboards. It's not yet available in reports. And so that is the custom layer demo. So you can try this as well after you have upgraded to 11.0.11. You import the samples with those 3 key values that I hope you screenshot, or you can pick up from the sample report that does this same map, but in a report format, not a dashboard. You can copy them from there. You can do this demo yourself. I do not know if the layer definition is available for download. I haven't found it yet, but that doesn't mean it's not available. So it may be worth Googling for it, and maybe you're a better Googler than I in terms of finding the GeoJSON definition for these, because I think that would be very instructive to have as well. So that's custom layers on a map. Let's take a quick gander at that classic schedule view that I was talking about. I'm just going to go to a report that I can schedule. So I'll go to samples reports. And so here's a perfectly reasonable report to schedule. I'll go to the property sheet, go to the schedule tab and I'll hit that, and I will of course get the new schedule interface by default. But if I scooch down to the bottom on the left-hand side, classic view, you see it opens in a new tab. And this is the very same scheduler that we have all used in the past. So if you prefer this scheduler in terms of capabilities or layout, you have absolutely got the ability to use it now. If you have, like me, grown accustomed to this view of the scheduler, there's no reason you have to switch. There's no reason you have to use the classic view. I just want you to know that it's available. So I'm pretty sure in terms of demonstrations, I think that takes us through all. If you have questions about anything to do with Cognos Analytics, or especially about anything I've introduced today, do please submit them through the chat feature in WebEx. I see that there are a couple. We will probably run out of time before we run out of questions today. So I promise to answer any questions you submit that I don't get to while we're on the air together via email after the webinar. So let's, the first question is, can I modify imported portal pages? And I also see one here, can I create new portal pages in 11? The answer is yes, if you enable the Cognos Connection portal, which I don't know that a lot of us realized you could do. But I've got time to actually demo this, so let me go ahead and demo it. First thing you have to do is you have to tell Cognos to enable the Cognos Connection portal, and that's an advanced property done through the administration console. It's a property on the dispatchers. So I'll go to configuration and dispatchers. I don't know that I've done it in this environment, so I think I'll have to do it by hand. Again, this won't require a restart, so it won't take long for this setting to take effect if it's not already here. It would be under advanced settings. I'm setting it globally, but you could set it on a dispatcher. Oh, nope, I did set it. Portal disable Cognos connection false. So it's sort of a backwards thing. You don't enable it with true. You disable the disable with false. But you have to first do this. Having done that, click OK, count to 10. You could then log into Cognos with a different URL, which I'll bet you is in my browser memory. But let me just start to type it, and I bet you it'll come up in the history. It is not an easy one to remember. So again, once it's up, you may want to take a, there it is. So this is so if you want to take a screenshot, that's the format of the, let me log into 11, but display the Cognos connection instead. So when you do that, if you did this, by the way, and you had not done the advanced setting I just showed you, it would log you in normally. There'd be no difference. The login would show up, and then when you got in, it would be identical. After you have done that advanced setting, the portal disable set to false, when you use that URL and log in, it won't take you to the Glass interface. It'll take you to the Cognos Connection interface. Now, it is not the full Cognos 10 interface. You'll notice there's no launch. I can't do Report Studio and Query Studio from here and that kind of thing. This is intended really for features that from 10 that have not yet been migrated to 11 is really why you would come here. And another example beyond the portal page stuff I'm about to demo would be the advanced bursting settings that are on the scheduler or are on the run with options. So the scheduler, of course, they just took care of that by exposing the classic scheduler. But before this release, the parallelization bursting options that were introduced in Cognos 10 were not available in the UI for Cognos 11. And so you would enable this, at least temporarily, to get at those advanced settings for bursting until they were added to the main interface. And one of the other reasons this exists is to display portal pages as tabs and to edit or create new portal pages. For example, I could click up here on the new page button and just quickly give it a name and add, whoops, I got to put it somewhere. I'll put it in my folders for OK and my folders. And then I can set it to a 2 columns, and I can add a tool on the left-hand side, like an HTML viewer. Actually, why don't we just go with Cognos content, and let me do a navigator on the left-hand side, and let me do a viewer on the right-hand side. It's kind of thing that I think a lot of us have done in the past, right? So now I've got my layout together. I can give it a name. I can hide things and that kind of stuff. I'll just hit finish. And out here in my folders, I now have a page which I can then come in and modify, edit, set this to be a different folder, set this up with an ID so these two can communicate with each other, and so on. So this is not a how do I build portal pages class. I just wanted to show you I can create them from scratch, and I can also modify existing ones from here. In this case, our existing ones are here in production reports. And then if I have to go to the properties and run my reports, and I need to modify it, I would actually have to unhide some things so that I can get in here, and then I could change some properties, right? So I get in here and change various properties. These are exactly the same ones that you had in Cognos 10. And then once I'm done, I would then re-hide those settings at the top, right, to get back to where my end users don't have access to those buttons just by doing that. And now, my modifications will be available for everyone. So it is absolutely possible to create new portal pages and to create or to modify existing portal pages in Cognos 11, but you have to do this enable Cognos connection first. So I think that answers that question. Let me just get out of there and get back in. And the next question that I see is a clarification question. What do you mean by interactive viewer? Okay, so quickly, I have time to answer this question, I think, and any others you've submitted, I apologize. I won't have time to answer today, but I'll absolutely answer by email after the webinar is done. So, interactive viewer. The interactive viewer is new to 11, so it was not part of 10. And a lot of the sample reports are running in the interactive viewer. And maybe the fastest way to talk about the interactive viewer is it's a way to run a report, almost any report, that enables my end user not only to consume the report contents and see screen values like this, but also interact with the values. And in this case, for example, I could add a filter. Or since this is dimensional data, I could explore and do drill down or drill up. If I scroll down here, here's some tabular data. If I click on poor and I click on satisfactory, I expected to be able to do a calculation there. Sometimes, I guess sometimes the contents of the bar is a surprise. But the notion here is look at all the different things I could do that I would normally think of as editing. I can add a summary. I can sort the data. I can filter the data. I can swap rows and columns. I can actually change this to a chart from a tabular display. So this is one of the two modes you can run a report in. I'm going to edit this report. I'm going to show you where the property is that enables or disables the interactive viewer. Let me change to design mode so we're not waiting for data to appear. In the property sheet, there is a setting at the report level. A couple of ways to get to the report level of the property sheet. One, use your ancestor button. Click on it and choose report. That'll take you to the report property sheet. The other way, if you're on your report page, right, is to actually open your Page Explorer or your Query Explorer. Either one has this report entry. If you click on the report entry, it'll take you right to the report level. And if your property sheet's open, you'll see the report properties. And the property you're interested in is right here, run with full interactivity. So you see it's set to yes. When you create new reports in Cognos 11 from scratch, if you will, this will generally be set to yes. The templates that you use that come with Cognos 11 all have this setting as yes. So by the way, you can create templates with this setting as no. But new reports are going to default to yes here. Upgraded Cognos 10 reports are going to default to no. But you can edit them. come to this property and set it to yes to get this interactive behavior. I'm just going to change this to no. And now I'm going to be running in the Cognos 10 viewer, or what IBM calls the classic viewer. You can tell if a report is running in the interactive viewer or the classic viewer two ways. One is by the URL. The perspective equals classic viewer in the URL tells you this is the Cognos 10 viewer. The other way, of course, is you click on it and you don't get a button bar, right? It's the look but don't touch viewer that we're used to in Cognos 10. Perspective equals edit, I believe, is what we'll see. Let's just take a look when it is the interactive viewer. Authoring. Perspective equals authoring. So classic viewer versus authoring, that's your visual cue as to which one. Plus, when you click on an item, you get a button bar. And that's another dead giveaway that you're using the interactive mode. So IBM refers to this as the graduated reporting interface. I can start out, if you will, in a classic viewer look but don't touch mode. I can then enable some editing features by running a report in the interactive mode. And then, of course, I could give people access to the full-on editor, the reporting tool that replaces Report Studio and Cognos Workspace Advanced. And then they would have full access. If you will, the button bars get a lot more robust in the full editor. So if I go back to that page and click on this chart, well, maybe they're not as, the chart is not as robust, but here on the, so lots of buttons here. On this tabular data, right? So 3 different levels, 3 graduations of capability in terms of edit, none, some, or all. So that's the interactive viewer. New reports will be interactive by default due to the templates all being set that way. Old reports from Cognos 10 that you upgrade, they'll all come up set to no. You can turn it to yes. Interactive maps and a lot of the other new features in Cognos 11, like the ability to update changeable filters and that sort of thing, only work if you're running in interactive mode. So all the Cognos 10 portal pages we update, right, they've been running in classic viewer all along because that was the only viewer I had in 10. So those running with only the classic viewer, not a big limitation. That's sort of how they've always worked. The interactive viewer, though, offers a lot of opportunity, but you can't use that in a portal page. So we've run out of time. I apologize to those of you who have submitted questions that I did not get a chance to answer, but I will answer them as soon as I can after today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. Again, my name is Rich Chester. My email address is there on the screen. I want to thank you very much for joining us. Have a great day.